Hi, fellow night owls. It's your friend from the other side, Knox of Tristis Owls. You're still awake, I see. Looks like you're going to join us to another tale which the air itself shivers with what you can't see. What if your nightmare is just the beginning of your terrifying reality? What if the chilling visions you experience while you sleep start to bleed into your conscious hours, blurring the lines between dream and reality? Prepare to question everything as you descend into a world where ghostly figures, sinister curses, and the chilling threat of your own death become terrifyingly real. Are you ready to feel the shivers behind your neck? Then sit back, grab and put on your headphones for a better listening experience. Tuck into your blankets and let yourself relax before we dive into the void. Unseen by Rivera. Chapter 1, Mind Heist. The silence of the night shattered. A raw, primal scream tore through the suffocating darkness, dragging Mark from the murky depths of a nightmare he couldn't quite grasp, yet whose icy tendrils still clutched at his skin. He shot upright, gasping for breath as if he'd just surfaced from a plunge into frigid water. A sheen of cold sweat slicked his skin. Each drop is a terror that still held him captive. Mark sat there, feverish, a trembling silhouette against the faint moonlight filtering through the window, letting the clammy moisture trickle down his temples. The ephemeral images of his dream remained frustratingly out of reach, lost in the chaotic aftermath of the sudden awakening. His hand instinctively went to his forehead, fingers raking back through damp hair in an attempt to grasp the fading fragments.
What in God's name was that all about?
The whispered question hung heavy in the stillness of the room, unanswered and unsettling. Pushing back the clinging remnants of sleep, Mark swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, the cool wood of the floor a stark contrast to his fevered skin. He moved towards the familiar bulk of his cabinet, his hand finding the soft loop of the face towel hanging precisely at the right corner, a small comfort in the lingering unease. As he blotted the dampness from his face and neck, his gaze drifted back to the rumpled expanse of his bed, then flickered to the luminous dial of the wall clock.
Are you kidding me?
Mark muttered, the digital numbers mocking him with their unwavering insistence. 2 a.m., still the dead heart of the night. He left the heavy silence of his room and walked to the kitchen. All he craved was the numbing embrace of a cold beer, a hope that it might somehow coax sleep back to his weary eyelids. Relief washed over him as he opened the refrigerator door and spotted the solitary can nestled amongst the forgotten leftovers. The satisfying hiss of the tab being pulled echoed in the quiet kitchen. Mark tilted the can and took a long, slow sip.
Ah, that's good.
He breathed, the icy liquid a welcome shock against his parched throat. It was cold, crisp, and carried a faint, familiar bitterness that usually soothed his frayed nerves. He scanned the room, seeking a place to settle and let the beer work its magic. The living room couch beckoned, its worn cushions promising a semblance of comfort. As Mark moved towards it, intending to flick on the television for some mindless distraction, his own reflection caught his eye in the darkened screen. His heart slammed against his ribs with such force that he felt its violent thud resonate in his ears. Mark froze, every muscle in his body locking in disbelief. Slowly, cautiously, he turned his head towards the couch, the beer can clutched tightly in his hand. But the space where he had just seen his mirrored image was empty, utterly, terrifyingly empty.
What the hell is happening?
The whispered words were barely audible, lost in the sudden, deafening roar as the television sprang to life, its volume blaring an incoherent cacophony of noise and static. The unexpected assault on his senses sent Mark stumbling backward, the half-empty beer can slipping from his grasp and clattering onto the floor, its contents spreading across the worn carpet. He landed heavily on his back, scrambling away from the malevolent glow of the screen, dragging himself across the floor. Then, cutting through the electronic noise, he heard it. His name. Clear, distinct, undeniably his. It was a voice disturbingly alien, emanating from the flickering screen. Mark! Driven by a morbid curiosity that trumped his fear, Mark crawled back towards the television. His eyes fixed on its pulsating light as it continued to call his name, each utterance sending a fresh wave of icy dread through him. As he reached the front of the set, the screen abruptly went black, plunging the room back into near darkness. A cold realization dawned upon him. The television wasn't even plugged in. His gaze drifted back to the blank screen, and there it was again, his reflection on the couch. But this time, the image was horrifyingly still, the eyes vacant and lifeless. Mark stared, his own eyes widening in disbelief and dawning terror. Then, with a sudden jolt, the screen flickered back to life, a news report already in progress. A knot of confusion and burgeoning fear tightened in his chest as he fumbled for the off button. Yet, the broadcast persisted, an unwelcome intrusion. The anchor's voice, somber and resonant, announced the disappearance of 8 hikers on the rugged terrain of Mount Apo. But before the narrative could unfold, the image dissolved into a blizzard of static, a high-pitched whine assaulting his ears. And then, he heard it again. Mark. At that instant, Mark gasped, his eyes snapping open to the familiar texture of his own bedsheets.
It was just a dream?
The sigh that escaped his lips was thick with relief, the lingering fear slowly receding like a receding tide. He ran a hand over his damp forehead, his fingers once again pushing his hair back from his face, the usual gesture a small anchor in the sea of his unease. His gaze drifted to the wall clock.
What the fuck?
The digital numbers glowed with an impossible familiarity. The time was exactly the same as it had been in his dream when the scream had first ripped through the night. A cold tendril of doubt snaked its way back into his consciousness. To dispel the unsettling feeling, to ground himself in reality, Mark pinched the skin on his forearm.
God damn it.
The sharp sting was undeniably real. Mark lay back down, the lingering echo of the scream still vibrating in the silence. Reaching for his phone on the nightstand, he thumbed open the messaging app and typed a quick message to Grace, his girlfriend, recounting the bizarre and terrifying dream. He wasn't expecting a reply at this ungodly hour, but a sliver of hope remained that if he were still trapped in some nightmarish loop, she might somehow receive and read it by the time she awoke. Chapter 2. Something's Different. The insistent buzz of Mark's phone dragged him from the comforting oblivion of sleep, a welcome interruption after the disquiet of the previous night. A sigh of contentment escaped his lips as he stretched languidly, his arms reaching overhead, his neck and back arching in a satisfying release. The chorus of pops and cracks that accompanied the movement was a recognizable and oddly gratifying sensation.
Oh, right, my phone.
The memory of the late-night text surfaced, nudging aside the lingering tendrils of sleep. Mark turned back towards the rumpled sheets and retrieved the device. It was a message from Grace, her concern radiating through the simple inquiry about his well-being. A faint smile touched his lips. Not only did her message confirm her care, but it also solidified the reality of his sending the text, a calming feeling against the unsettling ambiguity of the night before. He tapped out a quick reply, promising to recount the strange events when they met at school. The relentless march of time threatened to leave Mark stranded. A frustrated groan escaped his throat as he realized the minutes were slipping away, and the hunt for his missing photograph, meant to reside safely within the worn leather of his wallet, would have to wait. Grabbing his towel from its hook, he hurried out of the room, a sense of urgency propelling him forward. As he rounded the corner into the living room, his foot snagged on something cylindrical, sending him sprawling forward. The object, undeniably a can, skittered across the floor and bumped against the sofa as Mark scrambled to regain his footing.
Dexter, you lazy son of a...
The muttered curse hung in the air, directed at his perpetually untidy roommate. Mark ignored the minor mishap, a flicker of curiosity about the object he'd tripped over momentarily crossing his mind before being dismissed. The need for a shower and the looming lateness for school took precedence. He bolted towards the bathroom, the cool tiles a stark contrast to the lingering warmth of his bed. Yet, even beneath the spray of the shower, a persistent thought gnawed at the edges of Mark's awareness. The illogical, insistent feeling whispered the cylindrical object was his dream's beer can. Toweling himself dry with brisk movements, he found himself drawn back to the living room, an inexplicable need for confirmation pulling him. Mark knelt on the floor, peering beneath the sofa's dusty underbelly. His breath hitched. There it was. The beer can, identical to the one in his dream. A cold wave of confusion washed over him as he pulled it out, the metallic chill seeping into his palm. Clutching the can, he turned towards the kitchen, his mind a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Just as he reached the doorway, Dexter, in his usual boisterous manner, collided with him.
Whoa! Sorry, man.
Dexter exclaimed, his hand steadying Mark's arm. Mark stared back at him, his response a blank, uncomprehending gaze.
You all right, Mark?
Dexter's brow furrowed with concern.
Yeah. Sorry.
Mark stammered, the reality of the can still eclipsing the present moment. Then, Dexter's eyes fell upon the object clutched in Mark's hand. A slow shake of his head accompanied his gaze as he looked back at Mark, a wry smile playing on his lips.
You know the rules in this boarding house, man.
He said, his tone a brew of amusement and mock disapproval.
I know. No liquors and shit.
Mark replied absently, brushing past him, his mind still wrestling with the impossible. A hearty laugh followed him.
You stupid idiot. It's sharing the blessing.
A weak smile flickered across Mark's lips as he tossed the can into the overflowing trash bin. Despite Dexter's often irritating habits, a genuine warmth for him resided within Mark. He was, after all, the reason Mark had found this boarding house in the first place. He was a good friend in his own frenzied way. As Mark walked toward school, the unsettling dream clutched to him like a persistent shadow. Was it merely a figment of a restless night? Or had something truly strange occurred? The discovery of the can had only deepened the enigma, the image of his lifeless body on the sofa replaying in his mind with chilling clarity. It was the most profoundly disturbing vision he had ever experienced. Even the bustle of the school grounds couldn't dispel the unease that had taken root within Mark. It felt as though his mind had been invaded, leaving behind a residue of fear and confusion. As he approached the school gate, a sudden visceral feeling washed over him, a premonition of something terrible about to happen. An instinct, primeval and insistent, urged him to retreat. Hesitantly, Mark took a step back, then another, until he found himself turning away from the entrance, the day's classes abandoned before they had even begun. The school day eventually drew to a close, and Grace, finding Mark's usual seat in class empty, had texted him, her concern evident in her words. He replied, telling her he had returned to the boarding house. Soon after, she arrived, her brow furrowed with worry as she entered his room.
Honey, I have something to ask you.
Mark began, the weight of the previous night pressing down on him.
What is it? Is there something bothering you?
She asked softly, her eyes searching his.
Have you ever dreamt that you saw yourself dead, right there in front of you?
The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken horror. She shook her head, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern.
Why do you ask?
I had this dream last night. I saw myself lifeless on a sofa. And the thing is, it didn't even feel like a dream. You see, there was this can.
What can?
A can of beer.
You drank beer last night?
Her tone held a hint of surprise.
Well, yes. Just in my dream, I just took a sip.
Okay. And then?
Then I dropped the can in the living room. But when I woke up this morning, I tripped over the same can as I was leaving my room.
So, You really did drink beer last night, and you're just a little hungover and imagining things.
What? No. You're not understanding. I didn't drink last night, but that can was from my dream. And if you saw yourself dead in your dream, that's it, isn't it? That's when you'll die?
Honey, you're perfectly alive, as far as I can tell.
She stood up and gently cupped his chin, her touch reassuring.
You think too much about supernatural things. Come on,
She said, her voice softening.
get dressed.
Why? Where are we going?
Mark asked, still lost in the labyrinth of his unsettling experience.
Let's go out for dinner. Don't worry, nothing bad is going to happen to you. That's my promise.
She replied, a tender smile gracing her lips before she leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to his. Chapter 3: Darkest Night. The mundane act of stepping out for a simple dinner transformed into a moment steeped in unease for Mark. Just as he reached for the doorknob, a phantom whisper brushed against his right ear. Mark. A sibilant murmur of his name that sent a shiver tracing its way down his spine. He turned back into the room, his voice hushed with a sudden apprehension.
Honey, did you hear that?
Grace paused, her hand already outstretched towards the hallway.
Hear what?
Someone called me.
Her brow furrowed in confusion.
I didn't hear anything.
No, I know I did. It was like a breath, a whisper right beside me.
The certainty in Mark's voice was unwavering, despite her denial. A flicker of irritation crossed her features.
I don't know what you're talking about, Mark. Let's just go. We're already late.
She replied, a sharp edge to her tone. As Mark hesitated, his hand still hovering near the doorframe, a horrifying tableau unfolded within the confines of his room. Standing atop his bed, a figure of absolute darkness materialized. Its skin was an abyss, swallowing all light, and its eyes burned with an infernal crimson glow. A strangled gasp escaped Mark's lips as he slammed the door shut, his gaze snapping away from the terrifying apparition. His heart hammered against his ribs. The suffocating apprehension that had gripped him in his dream returned with brutal intensity. His legs felt weakened, threatening to buckle beneath him, and the world seemed to tilt precariously. Grace, her eyes widening at Mark's sudden visceral reaction, reached out, her voice laced with concern.
Mark, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost.
His skin was clammy, a cold sweat beading on his forehead, but the terror had stolen his voice, leaving him mute and trembling.
You look so pale, honey.
She murmured, her hands gently framing his face, her thumbs stroking his cheeks.
And you're sweating. What's wrong?
Nothing.
Mark managed to croak, reaching out to grasp her hand.
Let's just go and have a...
But the rest of the sentence died in his throat as the world dissolved into an absolute, impenetrable darkness. Consciousness abandoned Mark, leaving him adrift in a silent void. When awareness flickered back, Mark found himself nestled beneath the usual softness of his own bedsheets. Grace sat beside him, her fingers gently threading through his hair, her expression an amalgam of relief and worry.
Honey, are you okay?
She murmured, her voice soft.
You just passed out earlier. Are you sick?
With a slow, deliberate effort, Mark pushed himself up, the lingering fog in his mind gradually receding. He sat beside her, the events of the hallway still a fresh, unsettling memory.
I don't know.
He admitted, his voice still raspy.
Maybe I'm just exhausted.
You know what? You just need to rest. I'll go buy you something for dinner, all right?
She retrieved her purse from the nightstand and, with a final, concerned look, left him alone in the quiet of the room. Now, solitude enveloped Mark, amplifying the unsettling thoughts that swirled within his mind. Shaking his head in a fruitless attempt to clear the persistent confusion, he tried to rationalize the impossible things he had seen, things that existed only in his perception. Driven by a need for answers, he opened his laptop. He logged in, plugged in the broadband cable, and began his search, typing in vague keywords, hoping to find some explanation for the terrifying occurrences. After a few tense minutes of scrolling through obscure websites, he stumbled upon a forum discussing experiences eerily similar to his own. Just as he began to delve deeper into a particularly disturbing thread, the laptop screen flickered and died, plunging him back into a disconcerting silence. Frustration welled within Mark as he pressed the power button. Then, a sharp knock resounded from the door. It was Grace, a plastic bag containing their dinner in her hand.
What are you doing?
She asked, her eyes briefly flickering towards the unresponsive laptop.
Nothing.
Mark replied quickly, snapping the lid shut, a sudden defensiveness rising within him.
Here.
She said, extending the bag towards him.
Don't worry. I bought mine as well. We can still eat together, like it was our last dinner together.
A strange, almost melancholic tone underscored her words.
What did you just say?
A knot of unease tightened in Mark's stomach. She offered no response, her gaze distant as she scooped a spoonful of rice and held it out to him. A sense of foreboding washed over Mark as he accepted the offering. The rest of the meal passed in an unsettling silence. When they were finished, Grace stood up abruptly and left the room without a word. No goodnight kiss, no comforting hug. Mark simply sat there, watching her retreating figure, a cold dread settling in his heart. Perhaps she was still angry about their missed plans, but the silence, the lack of any physical contact, felt like something far more profound, a frightening premonition of a deeper, unspoken separation. Chapter 4: Sleepless. The suffocating confines of Mark's room offered no solace, the heavy silence amplifying the turmoil within. Seeking a breath of fresh air, a momentary respite from the oppressive uneasiness, he ventured out into the cool embrace of the night. The recent days had twisted reality into a disorienting nightmare, and Grace's unsettling shift in demeanor only added another layer to the growing unease. A deep sigh escaped Mark's lips, a silent proof to the gnawing anxiety as he wandered down a nearby alley, the chill of the night causing him to instinctively wrap his arms around himself, a vain attempt to ward off the cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. He was about to turn into a narrower passage, one that led towards the glow of a convenience store, when a figure emerged from the shadows. A strange man, cloaked in a black hood that obscured his features, sat hunched in a darkened corner. His voice, low and gravelly, cut through the stillness of the night.
Death is following you, mate.
Mark stopped, a prickle of unease raising the hairs on the back of his neck.
What the fuck did you say?
He asked, cautiously approaching him. He rose, his form unfolding from the shadows.
You can't escape death, especially when it was passed on to you.
Passed on? What the fuck are you talking about?
Mark's voice was a concoction of disbelief and burgeoning alarm.
Having dreams lately? Seeing yourself dying or dead?
His words struck with unnerving accuracy.
Yeah. How do you know that?
He offered no explanation, simply turning and walking away, his hooded figure melting back into the darkness. An urgent need for answers propelled Mark forward. He ran after him, his hand gripping the man's shoulder, halting his departure.
Hey, wait!
He led Mark deeper into the labyrinthine alleys, until they found a secluded alcove where the secrets of the night felt contained. He introduced himself as Todd, his eyes holding a strange, knowing glint. His words sent a fresh wave of icy trepidation through Mark. He claimed they shared the same affliction, that he could see the ghostly figures that now seemed to surround Mark, a silent, unseen audience of the deceased.
How can you see them?
Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper.
When your time is drawn near, you either see them or you feel the presence of those who are also close to the veil. In your case,
He continued, his gaze unwavering.
seeing you surrounded by so many, it gives me the impression that they are going to try and take over your body. Or perhaps you're cursed. By the way, you will start seeing them soon too.
Cursed? Who would curse me?
Confusion and a growing sense of agitation warred within Mark. He remained silent for a moment, then pressed a crudely fashioned voodoo doll into Mark's hand. Its touch sent a shiver of revulsion through him. He instructed Mark to acquire something belonging to his supposed tormentor, a ring, a photograph, and attach it to the doll.
You need to place this doll under your victim's bed, directly over the hex that was chanted with black magic. And when your victim sleeps, their soul will journey to another dimension, the dream world. As their spirit returns to their body, the curse will follow it back. But
his voice dropped, his gaze intense.
once someone has transferred their death or curse to you, you're in serious trouble. You will die, definitely, and there's nothing you can do. Unless you can find out who did this to you and kill them. That would be the only way to save your life.
His explanation was delivered with a petrifying matter-of-factness.
Wait.
Mark stammered, clutching the grotesque doll.
I don't know how to do any of these things. And I don't want to kill anyone just because I've been cursed or I'm about to die. I don't have the guts.
He thrust the doll back into Todd's hand, a wave of revulsion washing over him.
I'm not crazy and stupid enough to believe that such things exist. And why am I even standing here listening to a lunatic like you?
Mark's tone was sharp, laced with an attempt to deny the terrifying possibility he presented. He turned to leave, wanting nothing more than to escape the suffocating grip of his words. As Mark walked away, Todd's voice, now laced with alarming urgency, resonated behind him.
Watch out for sharp objects, and don't trust anyone. They will cause your death.
His final words were lost in the rising tide of Mark's own panicked thoughts.
Death! It will follow you wherever you go, even in your dreams. You could die. You could die while sleeping.
Todd's final, unsettling pronouncement hung in the air, a dark prophecy clinging to Mark like a shroud. Back in the relative safety of his boarding house room, Mark emptied his pockets, his phone, a few loose coins, his worn wallet, and placed them beside him on the bed. He checked his phone for any message from Grace, but the screen remained stubbornly blank. Yet, it was Todd's ominous words that truly gnawed at him. True or not, they had planted a seed of terror that was beginning to sprout in the fertile ground of his recent experiences. He lay down on the bed, his gaze fixed on the blank expanse of the ceiling. Sleep felt like a treacherous invitation. He closed his eyes, but instead of the oblivion he craved, a horrifying image flashed behind his eyelids. A figure in a mirror, a ghostly white lady with eyes that seemed to pierce his very soul, stared back at him. Terror jolted Mark upright, his breath catching in his throat. But she was no longer confined to the reflection. She stood before him, an ethereal presence that sent him tumbling backward, losing his balance and crashing to the floor. A paralyzing shiver of fear coursed through his body. He lay frozen, helpless, as she glided towards him. The lights in the room flickered and died, plunging him into darkness, only to blaze back on an instant. When the light returned, Mark's small room was filled with them. A silent, phantom throng, their translucent forms pressing in, their outstretched hands reaching, as if they sought to claim the very essence of his being. Suddenly, Mark gasped, his eyes snapping open to the sight of his bedroom ceiling. Again, it had been just a nightmare, but this time, the shocking realization struck him with brutal truth. Perhaps Todd had been right all along. Panic clawed at his throat. He didn't know what to do. To seek Todd out felt like walking further into the darkness. Yet to remain here felt equally perilous. Driven by an instinct for self-preservation, Mark rose and gathered every sharp object in his room, knives, scissors, even the broken shards of a forgotten picture frame, and locked them away in the drawer. The mirror on his wall felt like a malevolent portal, and the sharp edges of the window jalousies seemed to gleam with a sinister intent. He wrestled them from their fittings and carried them out of the room, depositing them in the hallway. Finally, he locked the door behind him, the click of the bolt a small, inadequate barrier against the unseen terrors that now haunted his waking and sleeping hours. This would be a long, sleepless night. Chapter 5. The Unexpected. 2 days crawled by in the suffocating stillness of Mark's self-imposed confinement. Food lay untouched, thirst unquenched. He had become a prisoner of his own terror, severing all ties with the world beyond his bolted door. Grace's worried calls persisted, her voice a constant plea, hinting at a truth she anguishedly wanted to share. He offered only the hollow excuse of illness, a flimsy reason to keep her at bay, fearing her touch might carry the same ghostly taint that clung to his waking hours. That afternoon, a fragile tendril of curiosity, or perhaps a distressed yearning for proof that the outside world still existed, compelled Mark to inch towards the door. He eased it open, the hinges groaning, creating a sliver of an opening. As his eye peered into the dimly lit hallway, the horrifying visage of the White Lady materialized inches from his face. A strangled cry escaped Mark's lips as he stumbled backward, his head cracking against the sharp edge of the wooden drawer. The violent impact sent a shockwave through him, causing the precarious lampshade to teeter and fall, crashing onto the floor where it would have struck his skull had he not flinched with frantic speed. The door slammed shut, and Mark scrambled back onto his bed, curling into a tight ball, his limbs shaking uncontrollably, a silent scream trapped in his throat. The third day brought with it the gnawing pangs of starvation and a dizzying weakness that threatened to pull him into the abyss. His stomach lurched, expelling its emptiness in a wretched spasm onto the floor. A naked fear clawed at his sanity. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves against the window pane, became a harbinger of unseen horrors. He was unraveling, lurching on the precipice of utter hysteria. Then, a soft knock against the door sent a thump of pure terror through Mark. The timbre of Grace's voice
Honey,
cut through the oppressive silence.
are you there?
With a monumental effort, Mark pushed himself to a shaky stand, his body leaning heavily against the wall for support as he shuffled towards the door. His hand trembled as he edged it open, revealing Grace's pale, anxious face.
Grace,
The single word was a mere exhalation, devoid of warmth or vitality. Shock widened her eyes, her gaze sweeping over his gaunt features. He was a mere shadow of himself, more akin to a corpse than a living man.
Oh my God, what happened to you, honey?
Mark wordlessly allowed her entry, his weakened body instinctively seeking the fragile comfort of her presence. As he clung to her, her hand instinctively went to the back of his neck, her brow furrowing as she registered the feverish heat radiating from his skin. As Grace gently assisted Mark back to the bed, her eyes fell upon the vile stain on the floor. Alarm flashed across her face.
Stay here.
She urged, her voice tight with concern.
I'll clean this up.
She grabbed a handful of his discarded clothes from the laundry basket and began to wipe away the mess. After tending to the squalor, Grace announced she was going out to buy some food for him. She left her bag beside him on the bed, its zipper carelessly half undone. A dark curiosity, fueled by the insidious strands of paranoia that now choked his every thought, compelled Mark to peer inside. Safety first, a small, rational part of his brain whispered amidst the chaos. He needed to know if she was concealing anything sharp. As he widened the opening, his breath hitched in his throat. Nestled amongst her personal belongings was a crudely fashioned voodoo doll. Wrapped around its deformed anatomy was his missing photograph. The shock was so profound it stole the very air from his lungs. leaving him speechless and reeling from the unexpected betrayal. Mark snatched the doll, its rough texture sending a jolt of revulsion through him. His legs moved with a strange, detached purpose, carrying him towards the door. He had to escape her to put distance between them. The depth of her perceived treachery was a wound, tearing at his insides. His steps were unsteady, his vision blurring with unshed tears as he stumbled out of his room and into the hallway. There, framed in the doorway of the boarding house, stood Dexter. A few steps behind him, her face engraved with worry, was Grace. Then, the world tilted precariously, and Mark collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a heavy thud, right at Dexter's feet.
Whoa, you okay, buddy?
Dexter's voice swam in Mark's fading consciousness as he caught him before he fully succumbed to the darkness. They helped him back to his room, Dexter gently laying his weakened body upon the bed. In the swirling vortex of his shock and disorientation, the memory of where the damning doll had fallen eluded him, lost in the encroaching fog of his delirium. Chapter 6: The Life and Death Decision. That night, Grace remained still by Mark's bedside. Yet, the horrifying discovery of the voodoo doll, his own captured image a lurid centerpiece, festered in his mind, poisoning any lingering filaments of affection. Todd's dismal prophecy rolled in the suffocating silence. Kill the one who cursed you. The stark reality of his words collided with the years of love Mark held for Grace, creating a chasm of impossible choices. Could he truly kill the woman who had been his world for 7 years? Grace eventually succumbed to sleep, her breathing soft and even, a deceptive mask of peace. Mark feigned unconsciousness, his thoughts a maelstrom of confusion and burgeoning resolve. The revelation of the doll replayed in his mind, each detail a fresh stab of betrayal. Then, a disquiet certainty solidified within him. This was the unspoken truth she had tried to convey during her frantic calls. Guilt, perhaps, had finally driven her to confess, but her intentions no longer mattered. The presence of the doll, the undeniable symbol of malevolent intent, spoke volumes. His life hung precariously in the balance, and a terrible decision had to be made. With agonizing slowness, Mark reached for the pillow beside him, its softness now imbued with a sinister purpose. His hand trembled as he positioned it over Grace's sleeping face. The moment the fabric muffled her soft breaths, her eyes snapped open, wide with confusion and dawning terror. A struggle ensued, her hands clawing at his arms, her nails raking across his skin, drawing thin lines of crimson. He pressed down with every ounce of strength left within him. A silent battle waged in the dim light of the room, until her frantic movements stilled, until the last flicker of life vanished from her eyes. As Mark lifted the pillow, a guttural sob tore from his chest. Grace lay still, her face pale and serene in death. Tears streamed down his face as he cradled her lifeless body, pressing a final kiss to her cold lips. A scream ripped through the silence, a regret that reverberated the shattering of his world. Then, the doorframe splintered with a violent crash as someone kicked it open. 2 uniformed policemen burst into the room, their weapons drawn, their faces grim and accusatory.
Freeze! Don't move! Don't you fucking move!
Their eyes fixed on the horrific scene, Mark embracing Grace's still body. Their rough hands pulled him away from her, dragging him towards the door, their accusations ringing in his ears. In their wake, Mark saw him, Dexter. He stood in the hallway, his face illuminated by the harsh glare of the light. He held the voodoo doll aloft. Within the depths of confusion, Mark saw his eyes shimmering with a profound, heart-wrenching sorrow. Then he realized this can't be. It was him all along. He was the architect of this nightmare. But the question that tore through Mark's ravaged mind was a disheartened, "Why?" Dexter walked near Mark and whispered,
You must not escape death, Mark. But she must. I'm sorry.
his voice dripping with pain as he stepped back.
Wait! Dexter, you son of a bitch!
Mark roared, breaking free from the policeman's restraining grip, lunging towards him. Then, the deafening crack of a gunshot ripped through the unforgiving night. The force of the impact slammed into Mark's chest, stopping him dead in his tracks. A searing pain blossomed outwards, followed by a nauseating wetness spreading across his shirt. He looked down, his vision blurring, and saw blood, the crimson stain blooming, a grisly flower against the fabric. He had been shot, his legs buckled, and he crashed to the floor, landing heavily on his face, the rough wood pressing against his cheek. Gasping for air, he vaguely overheard the policemen's voices.
Move back, sir!
A profound numbness began to creep through Mark's limbs, coldness seeping into his very core. His heartbeat, once a frantic drum, now slowed to a sluggish, fading rhythm. With all his remaining strength, he turned his head, his gaze finding his room, his bed, where Grace lay still. A final tear escaped his eye, tracing a hot path down his cheek. But before the darkness took him, he saw Dexter gripping the voodoo doll.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Dexter whispered, full of sorrow. Those were the last words he heard as a shadow stirred behind Dexter. Then another and another. They started walking slowly towards him. As these phantoms reached him, they all started pulling, ripping his soul away, drawing him into the void. If you liked our short story, please hit the like button. If you want more of our original short stories, subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. That's it for now, fellow night owls. Until next time, good night, sleep tight, keep the mirror out of your sight.